Top of the morning, Dan, into his administration. So the first 6 months, we'll see if that's still the timeline. Wants to get a commission together to explore whether or not to expand the Supreme Court of the United States. And of course, what's the purpose of the commission? To come back with a recommendation to expand the Supreme Court of the United States so we can say, like, convene this blue ribbon panel. They poured over the jurisprudence. They poured over the positives and negatives, and on balance, they think it would be in the interests of preserving our democracy to expand the court to 11 or 13 or 17 or 21 or 47 or some such number. What would that mean for gun rights? What would that mean for Supreme Court precedents such as Heller and McDonald? In addition to, I should say, perhaps what's going on right now, both in terms of the legislative proposals and the rhetoric from the left with respect to Second Amendment rights, is instructive. For more instruction on the topic, pleased to be joined again by John Lott, president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, former senior advisor for research and stats at the Department of Justice's Office of Legal Policy, author of books including Gun Control Myths and More Guns, Less Crime. John, thanks for joining us.
Oh, great to talk to you. Good morning.
So your perspective on that Supreme Court expansion commission that Biden has convened?
It seems kind of silly. Biden's determining the outcome of the commission by who he puts on it. So, he knows the views of these individuals before he puts them on the commission. So why doesn't he just tell everybody what he wants to do on this?
Well, because, you have to have the pageantry in the theater so that you give the appearance of deliberation, even if it's not real. But, invoking John Paul Stevens, a former Supreme Court justice who, after retiring, said time to do away with the Second Amendment, that seems to be the position of many on the left, and ostensibly it would be the position on an expanded court if Joe Biden got to appoint 2 or 4 or 7 or 11.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, there are lots of other things that Biden's already promising that are going to have huge impacts on people's ability to own guns. He's promised that during his first 100 days, he wants to pass a bill that would make gun makers and sellers liable for any damages that occur from their guns. I mean, people may remember the types of lawsuits that Chicago and other cities had back 20 years ago. If you were to apply that to something like cars, there's 4.5 million people who are injured in car accidents each year. Could you imagine if all those individuals were able to sue to go and get damages, cover health costs, pay for lost wages, pay for pain and suffering? What that would do to the car industry that's there? I mean, let alone the 40,000 people who die each year in cars. It'd probably put a good portion, if not almost all, the car industry out of business. You can't have any product where you only evaluate the cost of it in court and not also take into account whatever benefits the product might have. Computers. You could have it so that any time a computer is used in a crime, Apple computer or Lenovo or whatever would be legally liable for any harm that occurred as a result of the computer being used improperly. I mean, if somebody's driving and they're texting, or somebody is using a computer improperly, let's say to store child porn or whatever, why should the car maker or the computer company be liable for those types of crimes?
So do you think President Biden is the most anti-Second Amendment president we've ever seen?
Well, I think he probably shares a lot of views to what Obama had. And the thing is, with Obama, he didn't try to do those during his first term. And during his second term that was there, and even at the end of his first term, you had to have 60 votes. You had to filibuster in order to try to make any changes like that. And those things that he wanted to do were blocked by the Senate. Obviously, he imposed some regulations. Biden has a much more expansive view of what types of things can be done with regulations, and Kamala Harris doesn't seem to think that there's a limit to what a president can do. That she thinks that you can just go and ban guns with simple executive actions. But a lot's going to depend upon whether somebody like Joe Manchin is able to keep his promise that he's going to support allowing the filibuster to remain in place. Assuming that he keeps his promise, that at least limits things like the bill that we just talked about, even though it's within Biden's 100 days. But there are other things that Biden's going to do that are going to make it very costly for people to own guns. One of the things he's promised is to classify semi-automatic rifles and magazines that hold more than 10 rounds as what are called Class 3 weapons. Traditionally, that's been machine guns, and it's been silencers. And for those types of things, you have to go through an approval process. It takes at least 9 months right now. I assume if he expands it, it would take a much longer period of time. You have to pay $200. He's talking about also with executive order changing it so that it's $200 every year rather than a one-time fee of $200. That would just make it much more costly, much more difficult for people to own those types of items that were there.
There's also there's also been discussion at the federal level too of having to get a federal license to own guns at the state level.
Right. Well, I mean, the type of thing that we were just talking about with a Class 3 weapon, that would basically require licenses for all those types of items that we were just talking about. But Biden has also promised during the campaign that he wants to make it, use financial incentives, essentially take money away from states if they don't institute a state licensing program for people to own guns and registration for the guns that they own.
And at the state level, in blue states that are governed by anti-two-way politicians like Illinois, like New York, what else do we see? I know we saw a legislator in New York propose to prohibit bulletproof vests from private individuals. A private individual cannot own a bulletproof vest. That's in legislative form in New York. What other moves are we seeing to restrict gun rights at the state level in addition to the federal that you were describing?
Well, I mean, you've had state level politicians now over the last couple of years start to propose things as extreme as banning all semi-automatic guns. Stacey Abrams in Georgia even had signed on to a bill when she was in the state legislature right before she ran for governor there in order to ban semi-automatic guns. The vast majority of guns owned in the United States are semi-automatic guns. There's a reason why people own semi-automatic guns. The alternative is manually loaded guns where you have to physically put another bullet in the chamber yourself after you fire. A semi-automatic gun, despite what you see in TV shows all the time, is a gun where a bullet's fired and then it reloads itself. One pull of the trigger, one bullet comes out and reloads itself. There are lots of benefits for people having that. I mean, if you have multiple criminals attacking you, or you fire and you miss, or you fire and you wound but don't incapacitate the attacker that's there, being able to go and quickly fire a second round is something that can be very beneficial for individuals who want to protect themselves and their families. There are real costs for these types of rules that are being talked about. I think it's just the beginning. These gun control people, they keep talking about reasonable regulations, but these are the same people that wish that Chicago's handgun ban was back in place, or Washington, D.C.'s handgun ban was back in place.
They're always looking they're always looking for a way back to the good old days of bans that you're describing, and it seems that one of the arguments they've tried to try to raise the profile on recently, and we talked to a Texas state rep about this last week, is this idea of legislators carrying guns on the Capitol grounds and inside state capitals themselves, and the attempt to vilify legislators who would do that, particularly at the federal level. That's happening, but then it redounds to debates about the same sorts of policies at the state level.
Right. Well, there are 23 states right now that allow people to carry guns on Capitol property. Another 4 states informally do it because the legislators aren't checked when they come into the building. And for Congress from the beginning, congressmen and senators have been able to go and carry on Capitol grounds. There's never been a rule to stop them from doing that. And the thing is, you would think people could point to some problems, but there's no problems. They can't point to one person who's been wounded. They can't point to one person who's been killed. They can't point to one case where harm has come to somebody by somebody using a gun improperly in those situations. But yet, for a lot of gun control groups, it's their top policy agenda to try to go and accomplish. You know, the thing is, gun-free zones, we've seen the problems with gun-free zones. I mean, 94% of these mass public shootings occur in places where civilians are banned from having guns. And for Congress, just look at what happened a few years ago when the congressmen were attacked who were practicing for the baseball game that were there. They only survived because of the luck that Steve Scalise happened to be there with his security detail. And the reason why he had a security detail, he was in the House leadership at that time. But there were 5 congressmen there, at least 5, who had concealed handgun permits, but they weren't able to have them with them because at that time Washington, D.C. banned people carrying permanent concealed handguns. And so when they would either drive to the baseball game or practice or go back to the Capitol, they would have been breaking the law. There were members of their staff who had concealed handgun permits and would normally carry when they were allowed to, but they were all obeying the law that made it so that they couldn't go and carry in D.C. And the killer took advantage of that. I mean, one can only imagine, these killers are not stupid. They may be crazy in some sense, but they go and try to attack victims that they perceive as relatively defenseless. It's easier for them to go and attack a target that's not going to be able to go and fight back. And they do that time after time in terms of these successful attacks that occur.
He is John Lott, president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, former senior advisor for research and statistics at the Department of Justice's Office of Legal Policy, author of books including Gun Control Myths and More Guns, Less Crime. John Lott, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Oh, thanks. People can find more at our website at crimeresearch.org, crimeresearch.org. Thank you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM 560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
You know, when I was a kid growing up in Mount Prospect, I remember my parents discussing the 8.9% interest rate on a 30-year fixed mortgage. Times have changed. Hi, Amy Jacobson here. And in case you haven't heard, mortgage rates are truly at an all-time low, 3% and under. So do not wait. Call our great friends over at United Faith Mortgage. United Faith Mortgage is a small family team, just a couple dozen team members, run by father and son, John and Ryan. Faith is at their core, and they take their stance in their marketing as well. And now more than ever, we have to stick together. So if you want to work with the best in the business, call our good friends over at United Faith Mortgage. Their team is lucky to have a direct lender advantage. That allows them to often get you a better rate and save you monthly and lifelong money. Did I tell you that they'll pay your appraisal fee up to $500? UnitedFaithMortgage.com, UnitedFaithMortgage.com.
United Mortgage Corp, Melville, New York. NMLS number 1330. Ryan Brecka, NMLS number 65233. For all licensing information, go to NMLSConsumerAccess.org.
excuse me, I was just thinking about Balance of Nature when I should be telling you about Balance of Nature. It's about that time when you take Balance of Nature. Some people take 3 in the morning, 3 at night. I like to take all 6 together. Why? Well, I'm not getting enough fruits and veggies on my own. And that's where Balance of Nature comes in. 6 capsules, you're getting 10 servings of 31 different fruits and veggies. And it has all the goodies in there, but there's no preservatives, dyes, GMO, gluten-free. That's important. Made in America, too. And the founder, Dr. Howard, says that 70% of the produce we buy ends up in the garbage. And that's why he created Balance of Nature to help us take care of ourselves, and I take it to boost my